The lack of support system in place is the reason where a lot of things go in the extreme directions. Don't you think these extremities can be stopped or can be prevented from happening?
It's been probably 4 years now since I've had a drink of alcohol because I recognized that that was a trigger that it gives me the opportunity to be able to deal with that.
What do you think could be the reason for that, where the society as a whole is failing with empathy? They are not able to bring it into picture.
In females, I see that there is has always been a strong environment that has empathy. It's on the male side. Our male ego has a tendency to get the best of us.
How does this whole thing navigate for people who are not able to find the grief mentor?
The idea of a grief mentor, right, is it's a new concept. And so if you were to go to a mentor, if they're doing mentoring the way it's intended to be, that will be the start of that and getting into that relationship with your with your mentor. That's that's the first step.
Listeners, the grief of losing someone probably stayed with us for a time longer than we expected. I have been there over last 2 3 years. I have, had people in my circle for whom the journey of grief has been very different. For some, they were able to move on very early. They were able to accept the new normal very early. But for some, even after 3 years, they are yet not able to accept it. They are still, navigating it through. They are still finding their self with the absence of that particular person. And it gets really difficult for them to manage their day-to-day work. Plus, at the same time, we are gonna be, looking at a different version as well in today's episode with our speaker today, where we will be talking about the impact of trauma, or often known as the post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, as well. We'll be touching upon likely on that. And with this, I would like to welcome our guest for today, Doug Lawrence, on the show today. Hi, Doug. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. And thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate this.
The pleasure is all mine, and I'm really, really looking forward to the episode today. I have been going through your profile as well as the topics. These are some of the topics I would really like to understand more how people process grief, and I'm a big fan of a US web series called NCIS, and I every now and then
Yeah.
see a lot of Marines being talked about PTSD in that, or having difficulty. If we are not, PTSD is not there, having difficulty in going back to the normal civilian life. And way back, closer to my home as well in India, I have seen a lot of army personnel having that difficulty altogether. So, yeah, today I have the honor of having you. So, we'll be focusing a bit towards the US and the Canadian region and building on that. But yes, before we begin, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and, what made you come to this journey today?
I'll go back to sort of the beginning. I'm a retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer. So I served for 25 years in the police force. And I ended up, as a result of my service, I ended up with post-traumatic stress and had I had no one that I would consider to be part of my support structure. So I was kind of flying on my own, so to speak, and um, which made it really difficult. At some stage in my life, I think I turned to my wife and my two children for their support because what I was finding was that I was turning to alcohol was sort of my masking capability to get through stuff instead of, having conversations and talking through it. I turned to alcohol as a result of that. So um, I'm international certified mentor. I'm also an international best-selling author. And the international mentoring, I mentor people on an international basis. So I'm working with uh, organizations such as the American Corporate Partners, helping U.S. military transition from service to civilian life. I'm working with organizations that are helping young entrepreneurs start a business and get it going and stuff like that. So I'm I've got my foot in the water, so to speak, in a number of different places, and it's all for the idea behind what I try to do is number one, my first priority is to make the world a better place to be. And the second is to give people the opportunity to grow on a personal and professional basis through the use of mentoring techniques. Um, and now as part of that is I've also incorporated the aspect of grief mentoring into what it is that I offer to people to help them on their healing journey for the most part. So, yeah, that's kind of without getting into a much longer story. That's a little bit about me.
Thanks a lot, Doug, for sharing this your journey with us. You talked about, you yourself suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder after, you retired from the police force. Can you share some instances from your days, with being with the, police force that contributed to that PTSD?
I have one situation that I share. I have to be sensitive to what I say because of the individuals involved and stuff. But we I was stationed, I was working in a small community in northern British Columbia, and it was winter time, and we were getting set to pick a hockey team. We were going to go down the highway and we were going to play against the neighboring community. And as a result of that, uh, this young person ended up getting selected to be part of the men's hockey team, and he was absolutely ecstatic that he was getting this golden opportunity to be able to do that. And the rest of us were as well. We were very happy and very proud that he had done so well. And so he goes home to tell his parents what it is that he's accomplished, only to find that as he walked through the door into the house that they lived in, that his parents had been drinking all night. And of course, they were totally oblivious to what he was trying to tell them and how important it was and how he was looking for their support. And so as a result of them not responding the way he had hoped they would, he went into the bedroom and he grabbed a rifle, and it was death by suicide. So he took his own life, and the story evolves from there where we're in this northern community, and because it was a death by suicide, we had to do an autopsy. So we had to transport the body out to the nearest morgue where an autopsy could be done. And so if you can just picture, it's in the middle of winter, it's minus 40 degrees Celsius, and we have to travel. It's an 8-hour trip by vehicle. We have to travel, on gravel roads, and to be able to just to picture all of that taking place. And it ended up, long story short, it ended up that my wife, or at that time point, we were engaged to be married. She ended up being volunteered to go with me because my boss didn't want me to travel by myself, of course, considering all the weather conditions, the road. So she ended up going with me. She was she got to experience what life was going to be like for as a police officer's significant other. And I should probably mention that Deborah passed away in 2021 from cancer. So it that's part of why I have evolved to the stage of incorporating mentoring into grief and mentoring together in and being able to provide a grief mentoring type of support for other people as well. But to come back to your original question, so we ended up that we went to the we transported Deborah and I transported the body to the nearest morgue 8 hours away. We overnighted. We came back. When we come back, it 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 was like I got hit with this wave of I really don't know what it would be today, but I got hit with this massive sadness and obviously the start of my grieving of the loss of this young person. And that was what sort of started me down the road of turning to alcohol to be able to deal with it, not having support structure in place, no coping mechanisms, didn't understand what all that stuff meant. And as a result of that, that's when I ended up with post-traumatic stress. The interesting part was that I didn't know that that's what I was dealing with, which was the post-traumatic stress. It was um, it was after the fact that I was able to sort of sort things out in my own mind, kind of process everything and be able to get to a place where I went, okay, now I understand why I feel the way I do. Now I understand why it's important that I deal with this now rather than later. And I need to find something different for coping mechanisms other than the alcohol.
I understand. I'm really sorry to hear about your loss of, your wife, and I'm really,
Yeah.
I appreciate the way you have navigated your grief in supporting other people with navigating their own grief. So thanks a lot for the work you're doing, Doug, out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Um, you talked and touched upon the support system a lot of times, and I somewhere or the other echo with you, Doug, on this, where the lack of support system in place is one of the primary reasons I believe, and I could be wrong in saying this, but yes, I believe is the reason where a lot of things go in the extreme directions. If we have the right support or the right identifiers in place, people looking for those identifiers, uh, don't you think these extremities can be stopped or can be prevented from happening? What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely do. I do believe that if we're able to identify what works for us, so what coping skills or mechanisms that we like, for example, for me, I it's been probably 4 years now since I've had a drink of alcohol because I recognized that that was a trigger that caused me to feel, experience, whichever words you want to be able to use, it, it gives me the opportunity to be able to deal with that. And going forward, I need to find, I know for myself, the coping mechanisms, and that is that I'm on this journey. I'm on this journey to help myself heal, but I'm also on this journey to help others heal as well. And I need to make sure that I have the coping mechanisms in place to take care of me first, because if I'm not uh, as I describe it, if I'm not whole as a person, it makes it extremely difficult for me to be able to help somebody else who may or may not be experiencing grief in a similar fashion, because we all experience grief kind of on our own terms.
I agree. I totally agree with you on this, where each individual has his or her own way of, experiencing grief. And something that, that I've really recently realized and observed in the certain circles I usually sit with, there's a big lack of empathy out there.
Yeah.
And I would really love to hear your views because over the past 1 month, I have been doing a lot of research and study on empathetic listening, inclusivity, diversity. And every time something, stands out for me is the way empathy can make this society a very, an invigorating place to live in. But the lack of it is the major reason I believe a lot of stress triggers, delay in accepting the grief, and all these things, just revolve together around into a downward spiral. What are your thoughts?
Well, the main thing, I think the main thing for us all to accept and realize is that in order for us, to be able to move forward and to be able to help people and to show empathy and all of those things, it's a journey that we need to go on. And if you're if you can listen and hear what the other person has to say, and not necessarily do you have to always have an answer to what's taking place. You sometimes just being, you know, having some level of empathy to be able to help that person navigate. Sometimes that's all that's required. And, we're not expected to fix everything. That's probably one of the common myths that people get involved is that they feel they have to, and males are bad for that, where they feel they have to fix everything. And sometimes you just need to let it evolve, be there to listen and hear, be mindful of the confidentiality that is with the conversations and that you're having and going to have, and be able to move forward with that. But empathy is definitely something that we haven't done a good job in putting that into practice and actually using it as part of our coping mechanisms.
What do you think would be the reason for that, where the society as a whole is failing with empathy? They are not able to bring it into picture.
To be truthfully honest, I see that in females, I see that has always been a strong environment that has empathy. It's it's on the male side that we're somewhat reluctant to go down that path, and part of that is our male ego has a tendency to get the best of us. And when we should or could be looking at a situation where we're able to deal with it more with more empathy, we choose not to because we feel it's a sign of weakness.
Understood. Understood. We were discussing about the support system, Doug, just a few minutes back. Help me understand, and probably things have evolved over a period of time, but yes, what I have seen is missing as part of the agencies that are responsible for the security of the society or for the, safeguarding of the society out there. There is nobody looking for the betterment of those, members of those agencies, be it the army, be it the police force. I don't see any structures in place to very, in a structured manner or in a very easy to navigate manner, provisions being made by the police force or the army army as a whole to support these stress triggers, or the transition from the army life to the civilian life? What are your thoughts? And has things changed over the years?
They've changed, but they haven't changed to the extent that how would I word this? You that you would want to see by this time, in society. Excuse me. I'm always trying to be positive in that I feel that we have made some inroads. We've definitely gained some traction. But then I'm saddened at the same time where I have, say, a young police officer stationed in a northern community who gets lots of calls to deal with situations that are traumatic, and yet there's no that's the one complaint that that individual had, was that I've got no one I can really turn to. I've got no one that I can, talk to. I don't want to bring all this stuff home and share it with my wife, because she shouldn't be subjected to that sort of trauma. Um, so it's a matter of being able to from a support structure, is identify what does that structure look like? What are the tools I need in order to make the most of that structure? And then just be of what's how would I word it? Continuous support for the people that you're working with.
Understood. And again, the things have evolved. I have also seen few things being put in place, but most of them at a very superficial level, as you mentioned, that it has not been implemented to the level it should. We are sitting in 2025 where, you know, at least the recognition of mental health or emotional health has come to the broad daylight. But its acceptance to the level where we have proper provisions in place in the organizations is not yet there.
No, it's not. Well, I think back to the time frame, and this goes back a few years, but when my I was working in government, and my mom passed away, and she I I went back to work. Probably, I think it was 5 days later, I was back working and having to deal with people coming up and saying, "Where were you for the last 5 days? You missed a couple meetings and stuff like that." And the organization hadn't put any communication in place to be able to, first off, maybe have the conversation with me to sort of say, "Are you okay if we, send out a message to the employees to be able to say that, you may, that you're dealing with the loss of your mom." And because I went to a couple meet functions, I guess is what it would be, and people said, where have you been, and all that sort of stuff, and so that's an added stressor on top of, because now I'm feeling less of a person because nobody thought it was important enough to share it with the rest of the staff. So and that goes back to, gosh, what would that have been? 2007, it goes back a number of years, and I haven't seen that evolve, that sort of thing from an organizational perspective. I haven't seen that evolve very much at all.
You know, one part of the support system is where we talk about the workplace providing that support system and being the support system for us. Um, I do understand the aspect where we don't want to, take home the trauma that we are suffering from, or make our wives or children subject to what we have been subjected to. But help me understand, wouldn't it be a better place to be in where your better half, and be it could be wife or husband, because we have both the genders or all the genders in the force today. So wouldn't it be better where the better halves are able to provide a space for the other one in the force to come back and vent out, share what they have been through? So would that not help?
So it can be a slippery slope to walk on because you're trying, and that's an interesting scenario where both members of the family are police officers, and you do see that. For me, I would want to have, and I did this with Deborah because she got involved in some stuff because I was in a couple places where I was the only police officer for miles and miles around, and she actually, was my backup. But I was very careful how much how far I took her down that path to be able to, to help me out. But at the same time, I wanted to be very cautious in protecting her and the children as well. I wanted to be very cautious about how much I gave them to process and how much I tried to figure out a different approach in order to be able to for me to process what I was carrying because there was all kinds like the story I shared earlier. Um, that was quite an experience for her to be riding in the police vehicle that's transporting, a young lad's remains to the nearest morgue, and then for her to have to help with, the stuff I had to do when I got to the morgue, that she ended up having to help me make that all happen. And then we had to drive back, and you know, you could tell, I could see it in her eyes as we were driving home, the 8 hour trip. I could see that she was going through a you know, she was going through a process to be able to understand things a little bit better than, you know, uh, what she had when we first started on the journey.
Understood. Understood. Can you share, some of the biggest challenges that are often, faced by the police personnel or the army personnel when they're transitioning back to the civilian life? And what could be the ways to navigate those to have that ease of navigation or ease of settlement?
I don't know. The transition is not something that is easy to do. And I know that just, listening to, some of the service people that I'm working with that are going through the transitioning process, they've seen some horrific things. They've had to experience a lot of horrible stuff, and they need one of the things I always suggest is, yes, I can spend time with you and help you navigate and all that sort of stuff. But there will come a time where you will need professional help, professional counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists to be able to help you work through some of those things. I know that excuse me, I know that what I've been told by some of them that I've worked with is that they prefer to have a mentor to be able to walk beside them and not pass judgment and all of those positive things. They prefer to have somebody like that versus a counselor or a psychologist or psychiatrist, they feel that the safe place that I create is more meaningful for them than anything else.
Understood. Um, Doug, even in your introduction, as well as while you have been sharing your experiences with us, you've mentioned about being a mentor out there. Whereas in today's world, what I have primarily seen is people talk a lot about being a coach or providing coaching to the people. So what's the difference between the two? That's something keeping me really curious out here and would like to understand your views.
Yeah, the for me, and this is my definition, is that, and I know that if you have people from the coaching world that are out there listening, they're gonna obviously disagree because it's I have some documents that actually go through and spell out what the differences between coaching and mentoring actually is. Um, for me, coaching is something that is used to deal with performance related issues in an employee. Coach or mentoring is it's developmental. It's what do we need to do to help you grow personally and professionally as a person and as an employee. And that's kind of the separation. I sort of, I view, um, and I've had this happen where an organization has called me up and said, "Can you come in and spend some time with one of our employees? We've put them through the coaching program and we haven't been able to see any change. And if things don't change, we're going to have to terminate the employee." And I said, "Well, let's not rush into that very too quickly." And long story short, after five after 5 1-hour sessions, I was able to get the employee to do a behavior change where they became a very productive individual. They became somebody who uh, would be able to be open and share what they're dealing with and struggling and all of those things. And it only took 5 1-hour sessions of mentoring, and yet the coaching side was not able to get that movement taking place. So that kind of gives you a working example of the difference between the two.
Yep, it does. It does. So how does the role of mentoring comes into picture when we talk about navigating PTSD out there?
So the one thing that how I see us applying mentoring in that world, in that realm, is that so I go to my counselor, I go to my psychologist, psychiatrist, and we go through our normal monthly meeting, and then he or she says, "Okay, Doug, we're good now for a month." What happens in that month time period if I need some assistance or some guidance or whatever, and I can't get access to my counselor or my psychologist because they're overbooked, and I can't get access to them. What my research had shown was that it's a good place to have kind of that mentor, that a PTSD mentor, if you want to use that term, but the one I use is a grief mentor, is that it's somebody that is between when my, it's the bridge between my appointment today that's going to happen in a month to 2 months down the road. I need somebody, and so I go to my grief mentor or my PTSD mentor, and I say, "Help, I need help." And that's the service that they can also provide. They don't diagnose, they don't prescribe anything. They're there to support and nothing more than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. And
Okay.
that sort of, brings me to my next question, Doug, on this whole aspect. And it brought me to a very alarming thing where we are saying that somebody who is going through some form of emotional trauma or navigating some mental trauma to find themselves back again. And you can, help me evolve on this particular space because I'm not aware how the healthcare system works over there in Canada. But saying that I can only give you a one session in a month, how does that justify or suppose that person? Because let's say, and it's in my personal experience as well, where the initial few sessions are really triggering. They really get you to revisit the places which have brought you to, you know, the point where you are today. And now I'm saying that, okay, I have triggered you today. Go back, wait for the next 30 days, and then come back to me. I totally understand the role of a mentor, a grief mentor in this whole process. But for those people who are unable to find a grief mentor, how do they manage that whole 1 month? Because for me, when I was going through certain sessions, just going through it for a week was very difficult because with the initial session, the triggers that came out up till the next session, I had a very difficult time to settling myself back again, finding my that emotional safe space that I had built over the years where I was not being too triggered with other people out there. I was not impacting the lives of others that were around me. So how does this whole thing navigate for people who are not able to find the grief mentor?
I think the most important thing for us to realize at this stage is that this is a relatively new concept. So the idea of a grief mentor, right, is it's a new concept. And so if you were to go to a mentor, just a normal someone who said, I'm a mentor, they would be able to, if they're doing mentoring the way it's intended to be, where you're providing support on a personal and professional basis, if you're able to do that, then there's going to be uh, that will be the start of that and getting into that relationship with with your mentor. That's that's the first step. But I know, like for me, uh, I have I have yet to turn someone away who is reaching out and wanting help.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Uh, but again, how does that, the healthcare system supports it out there? Uh, and I understand there are very few people out there who are actually providing the counseling services. There are very few professionals available, and it's their own mental health as well as the schedule that's available. We only have 24 hours in our hands every day. So what better things along with adding more professionals to the space can be done. One part is where we add more number of professionals who can take this up, and a second version of the same is where we have grief mentors like yourself who act as the bridge between the two sessions. But what except these 2 points we can have where the system can be more um, accepting and more easy for the people suffering from traumas to navigate.
So you need to ask yourself, where did I get that trauma in the first place? Was it on the job, or was it something that I was involved in on a more personal level, or what was it? But we have to be accountable for what it is and the place that these people have ended up coming to, because I like I using, the situation with my mom, I went through, grief with her passing and all of that. The organization, the government entity that I was working for, there's a responsibility on their part to be able to put things in place that are going to help me on my healing journey. Because the more they do that, the more productive I can be, and the more productive I become is for the betterment of the organization as a whole.
I agree. I totally agree. If the support system is put in place at the workplace as well as different touch points of an individual's life, that can definitely make the society be more conducive and invigorating for people, going through and navigating the mental health issues.
One of the things that I noticed and I've been a huge supporter of is you have your EMS people, so people that respond, first responders and stuff like that. And what we don't do, and we don't do well, is we don't provide them with a debriefing at the end of every call that they come back from. So they get called to say somebody's having a heart attack or something like that, and it ends up the person passes away while they're trying to transport them to a place where they can get proper medical care and stuff like that. We don't take into account what that does for that EMS driver. We don't take anything into account about, their well-being and, all the things that they're now experiencing and feeling and all that sort of stuff. We don't do anything about that. And what I'm saying, and certainly it's been echoed by a very small group of EMS personnel, is that that's what they need to have, is they need that debriefing so that we can start to get rid of all of that pent up grief that, even though it wasn't a loved one of our own, it was still somebody that we were caring for. And it's important that we be able to help as much as we possibly can.
That's an insight. I believe a lot of areas where people are left in oblivion, and emergency services or people in the paramedical space, they are not often given the importance they should be.
Yeah,
And let alone talking about the mental health support for their own need, it's, I believe, is still a far-fetched dream.
yeah, yeah, I would agree.
Look, we have been discussing about the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorders, and trauma a lot. And certain areas we have touched upon the grief aspect of things. For people in the force, there, as per me, there are two different forms of grief they often have to go through. One is where they lose somebody of, from their own family. That's one aspect they have to navigate. And at the same time, as part of their job, they have to go through the grief, as you were sharing about the, young kid who, took his own life. You have to experience so many such cases day in, day out. How do you really navigate and safeguard yourselves from these scenarios? Because uh I'm sure on the television what we are shown either as part of the news or as part of any web series, it is not as heinous as what you guys have to experience. Just watching it over the screen is very easy, and at times those very filtered views of those crime scenes leave a lot of us shocked and to really impact us at the core. And you guys are at the scene managing it. uh, how do you really navigate that, and how do you actually compartmentalize your brain to be able to do that job? You have to go through a lot of tough questioning to find that person who really did that heinous crime.
Part of my healing journey can be something as simple as just turning off the TV and not watching the program anymore. So you just because there's nobody that's puts you in front of that television and you watch, you're a show you're watching and lots of trauma and by doing that, that also uh, triggers, other feelings that you're experiencing as well. So it acts as a trigger. So the way that we need to deal with that is we get rid of that trigger or we minimize the amount of impact it's going to have on us as an individual. So, there's certainly that part to take into account.
Mhm.
What was your other part of your question again? Sorry.
So yeah, again, how do you really, enable yourself to be able to do the job out there as a police personnel or as an army personnel? You have to, really leave back or ignore your own emotions, probably just lock them into some part of your brain and shove them somewhere aside to be able to focus on your brain, main job. How do you guys do that?
You have to be able to uh, you have to process it, and in order to process, you need to have conversations. You need to find somebody that you can talk to. And I've had situations where just recently I wrote a couple articles that talked about loneliness and sadness and it was all things that I was experiencing at that particular time point. And that triggered in a number of other people the fact that they were now concerned about my mental health and mental well-being, and they were concerned that I may have suicidal thoughts, and which wasn't certainly wasn't my intention in what I wrote, but after the fact, after I read it over again, I could understand and see. But what it did for me was that it demonstrated that people are watching, people are listening to people that are part of your support structure are concerned about your well-being, and they were getting ready to have to do whatever they needed to do to get me back on track.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Really, really appreciate the people in your circle out there. Uh, you know, Something that I around 4 years back when the COVID was happening and a lot of things going through. Um, I wrote few lines which, though primarily were in Hindi, my mother tongue, but yes, just to concise them into English. The whole message of the poem or the lines that I wrote was there are the telltale signs visible as your friends in your circle really picked up on those points when you wrote that particular post. Probably wrote it from a very different intention, but they were vigilant enough to check that post, reach out to you and ask you, are you okay? For majority of people out there, that does not happen.
No.
We can definitely blame the nuclear structure of the society as it is evolving moving further. People are becoming more individualistic rather than collectivism, being coming into picture. Uh, how, as a society, we can be more, I would say, accepting and vulnerable to this possibility of that somebody can be going through some difficult times. They might not be showing it in the physical persona or in the verbal, communication, but be able to identify those signs and probably help save a life.
I always tell people that you need to, when somebody walks into a room, how I call it, you need to do a scan. You got to, you do a scan to be able to say something's not quite right. And when I do that, I will always ask the question, I'm getting this feeling or this sense that you're struggling with some things, and I just want you to know that I'm here for you if, if you want to talk. And if you're comfortable, dealing with this stuff in your own time, that's great. But just know that you're not alone. You're here, I'm here to be your support person if you need somebody.
Is it that simple?
It's not rocket science. It's really truly, if we care enough about people, our circle, even beyond that, if you care about people genuinely, it's something that's really actually quite easy. Every day that goes by for me, I am always vigilant and watching how people are behaving, watching how, what are some of the things that, that an individual who yesterday was behaving this way and now today is behaving a different way. And I can just tell from the conversations and from the body language and all of those factors, I can just tell that something's not quite right and we need to address it. Especially, it can be, at some stage asking the question, excuse me, asking the question, uh, something's just not right. And, I help me understand is there something I can do to help you?
Often in my own personal experience, Doug, I have, come across people where their aura somewhere or the other communicates with me. And I get that gut feel that something's not right. The person is going through something which they are not really putting out. And I do try to reach out to them whenever possible. But yes, most of the times I often, find that the other person should not get uncomfortable. So how do we really, find that bridge between enabling them to know that, yes, we are there for you, but also making sure at the same time that by saying this or by reaching out of what we have sort of identified or felt with the persona or aura out there, we're not making them uncomfortable.
Ideally, what you want to be able to do is to create a psychological safe place for them to come to. So you want to, you definitely want to be able to do that. Um, and I think that the more we do that, the more that we increase our capabilities to be able to uh, help people feel at ease. I think the more that we can do, and a lot of that is just practice. The more times you do that, you get comfortable. People recognize you as a person who they can turn to, that there's a level of trust. So it becomes a trusting relationship. But the big thing, is that you are able to. I have this quite often where individuals say, I find you very easy to talk to. And because of that, I'm willing to share more and more of what I'm dealing with.
I understand. I understand. Uh, Doug, any final thoughts you'd like to share around navigating grief or the trauma that people suffer from?
So, with the navigating of grief, you need to know and be mindful of the fact that it is an ongoing journey. And there is no official start date and end date when or when grieving is going to start. So you need to be mindful of the fact that it can be a continually evolving process that you're going to end up having to go through. Do not do not bury your grief. You need to process it. So don't end up just keep piling more and more grief on top of each thing. You need to process it as it happens and be able to move on from there. Um, you need to understand that each one of us deals with grief in our own special way, and we need to be mindful and respectful of that, that individuals do, in fact, you know, they need to process things the way they need to process. So those are, certainly those are some of the things, and probably the last thing is that it's okay. How I describe it is it's okay to come out of the closet and say, I need help. And someone will be there to help you continue your healing journey and be able to move forward. But it's okay to ask for help.
I agree. I totally agree with you on this. And before we conclude, Doug, you mentioned that you work with the new age entrepreneurs as well, and I read through your bio that you're working with Sir Richard Branson as well in supporting young entrepreneurs. So, can you shed some light on that and the struggles that a startup entrepreneur goes through? Because dealing with the failure of a startup idea which was very close to your heart, something in which you invest your the most precious years of your life, the youth of your life, and if it does not really succeed, that's a trauma in itself, because during those years you have to go against the wave of the time, as well as a lot of people who love you, who want you to be safe and secure with your future, and you go against all of them. But then at the end, your startup does not succeed, you fail at it. How do you really overcome that trauma to get back and say, I can do it again?
Well, number one, it's for young entrepreneurs to go on the journey that they're going on without the benefit of a mentor walking beside them is probably not the smartest business decision they're going to make. I know like you've mentioned, Sir Richard Branson's entrepreneur program in the Caribbean. We talked about American Corporate Partners, where a lot of those service people want to start their own business after they come out of the service. And then there's, Futurepreneur, an organization out of Ontario that does much the same as the Branson program and that where they offer, excuse me, they offer funding to young entrepreneurs to help them get their program to get whatever their business is to get it off the ground. The interesting part with them is that it's having a mentor is contingent on them getting the funding for their business.
Oh,
So there's some incentive obviously there to be able to deal with that. What we've started, I know with some of them, is that we've started to plant the seed that uh, starting your own business is very stressful. And, it's certainly your mental health and mental well-being can certainly take a hit when you're trying to get your business together and do presentations and excuse me, and then end up getting it out there. So what I have spoke to a couple of those organizations and we've done sort of what I've tried to do is prepare the mentors to be able to provide that support structure that's needed to be able to move forward. And in doing so, we're going to not necessarily make all the stress and all that stuff go away, but we're certainly going to help mitigate it so that the young entrepreneur can continue to go forward with the building of their business.
understood. Understood. Doug, I'm really, really thankful to you for the work that you're doing out there, be it with people suffering from grief or trauma and supporting the young entrepreneurs. Really, really appreciate your work. And thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts and insights on our podcast today.
Thank you very much.
And listeners, Grief, healing, and growth are the three words that might seem world apart, but today's conversation showed us how deeply intertwined they are. Whether it's an employee struggling silently, your friend suffering in his or her own oblivion, reach out. Or if you are the one who is suffering, as Doug mentioned, you just need to say that I need help. And if today's episode stirred something within you, you have been carrying a loss, or you know someone who might need help, just reach out. I invite you to share your worries, stress, or questions, and you can just do it all anonymously on a mental health platform that's called We Are Listening, the name of the podcast itself. The link to the platform would be available in the description of episode wherever you're listening this episode. Do reach out and just say I need help. There are people waiting. There are, angels looking to support you out there. And remember, stay tuned. And until next time, we are listening. Just say, I need help. Thank you.